Welcome to Learning Module Week 7. We're going to call this 7.1. It's the introduction to our discussion on logistics. I love this, I don't know if I love it, it's kind of brutal, but Alexander the Great once said, "My logisticians are a humorless lot. They know if my campaign fails, they are the first ones I will slay." Ouch. Okay, but it is an attention getter, and it's an easy way to lead into the origins of this logistics term. So comes from the military from way back in the day, and it was used by the military for many, many hundreds and hundreds of years, thousands, I suppose. And it referred to the abilities that the military gained in getting armies supplied, right? So the roads were pitiful at best, right? There's no help from any kind of automation, and they needed to feed the armies, provision the armies with goods and things for battle and so forth. So military organizations were the first to deal with trying to move materials, people, supplies across long distances, and they became good at it. And the term logistics comes from all of that activity over many, many hundreds of years in the military. Let's take a look at what we can say about logistics now in modern business. So in this section, we're going to do an introduction first, and then we'll talk about transportation modes. We'll talk about warehousing, and then we'll go through some kind of decision science stuff where we can look at how we could make better logistics decision using a few different models. So logistics management, here we have a definition. It's from the CSCMP, that is the Council of Supply Chain Management Professionals, and it's a long definition, but it's a very good definition. So sometimes you can tell when you read one of these that they sweated out every word, and it probably took months, right? But in that case, every word has meaning. So logistics management, that part of supply chain management that plans, implements, controls the efficient, effective, forward and reverse flow and storage of goods, services, and related information between the point of origin and the point of consumption in order to meet customer requirements. Wow. Take a deep breath, right, for that guy. But it's a great sentence. It does say it all. You have to give it very good credit that it does say it all. And even captures that reverse flow, right, which is growing, this return of goods. And we'll talk about that a little bit in this section. So the planning and the doing of just about anything related to moving materials in a way that makes customers happy. So we'll talk about some of these in more detail than others, but logistics management activities include transportation. We'll hit that one hard, and warehousing, we'll hit that one hard. Material handling, packaging, inventory management, logistics information systems. These other four areas we'll just touch on lightly. And we'll spend most of our time on the core cost areas, really, and performance areas of transportation and warehousing. Logistics strategy. So we've talked about strategy a number of times, and this is a good chance to remind that a logistics strategy is a functional strategy, and as such it needs to support the business strategy, right? It needs to be aligned to the business strategy. So the choices that we make, the investments that we make, the systems that we build, the partners that we take on, what we do inside, what we outsource, should all be consistent with how we're trying to run our business and create value for our customers. The impact of logistics. So this is just a couple of points to point out how important logistics is to do it well, because it costs a lot of money. It costs a lot of money to move materials. In 2012 in the U.S., there was a $1.33 trillion spend on logistics activity, which was 8.5% of GDP. That's monstrous. Monstrous. And we see it going on around us every day, but we don't think of it, right? But it's happening all around us all the time. We've got highway trucks We pass on the freeways constantly as we drive past warehouses, stores that are bringing goods in, and manufacturers that are buying raw materials, transforming those through their operations and shipping them back out, all the material handling systems inside of some of those facilities. So there's a huge cost in logistics and a huge impact, and it pays firms to do well at it. Now, there's a nice point on this slide. Since 1980, we've been having improvements. It was something like 17.5% or so in 1980. So we've got more efficient vehicles, right? And transportation, whether it's on ship or whether it's a highway truck, right? More efficient use of energy. So that drives, keeps a lid on cost, that we're burning less fuel, for example, or we have higher quality or assets that last longer in a new diesel engine compared to an old one, maybe. It also shows some attention to the modern systems that we have, right? Because we have such visibility now and ability to model what an efficient plan would be to transport from halfway around the world to our backyard, that professionals in this area are able to model things very efficiently, and that also saves a lot of cost. Costs are expected to grow from this point right now where we're at this juncture, and part of that is a movement towards smaller shipments. Part of it's globalization as well, right? The ever increasing amount of trade across borders. But a lot of that is this this is not a phrase, it's something I coined because everybody can relate, the Amazon effect. All of these small parcels that many of us are bringing into our homes and having UPS bring is not as efficient as, maybe we could find if we had gone to Costco to pick it up and not had that truck, doing that last mile for us, for example. Okay, so another point about strategy with logistics. We've talked about how important it is as a strategic point to insource or outsource, that it's a big deal, right? And we may have ways to vent off a little steam with capacity and have somebody do a little work for us for 6 months. But generally, when we think about outsourcing big pieces of a function, it's a really important decision, and it needs to be vetted out carefully. But there are options for insourcing and outsourcing logistics, which are plentiful, really. I mean, we can own our own fleet of whatever it is that's doing the transport. We can own our own ships. We can own our own trucks. It might be a little harder to own your own railway, but we can own some of the assets involved in logistics, or we can outsource some of those assets, right? And a lot of firms outsource, but a company like a Walmart, they're going to insource. It's a specialty. It's part of their core competency, right? That moving the materials in a way that their competitors can't match. But many firms will outsource, and there's a few different options there. But we should think of it strategically. So does the firm have the volume needed to justify a private logistics system? And what is the math behind that, right? Do the math. Think of the overall strategic impact and all of the areas where we say, well, are we losing strategic flexibility, as we talked about in the sourcing conversation in that learning module? Are we gaining or losing strategic flexibility? How much capital is it going to take if we decide to do this ourselves? And what are all the benefits and all the risks, right? And would owning the logistics system limit the firm's ability to respond to changes in the marketplace or the supply chain? That's that strategic flexibility point that's so important to carefully consider. Is logistics a core competency for the firm, like with Walmart that we mentioned a moment ago? So we have some options that kind of blend and overlap a little bit when it comes to some of the actual transportation modes. So common carriers, when we talk especially about highway freight, we hear about common carriers. And a common carrier means that we can basically call a truck that is out for hire and is ready to serve us. And these are major trucking lines that will take that order as a common carrier and also blend their business with some of it being contracted. So maybe if I don't ship very often, and I just want to call in a truck as I need them, I might use exclusively common carriers. I'll pay a little bit more per load. Contract carriers are if I start to get regular business and regular shipping and I want to bring down my cost and I'm willing to make a commitment to somebody for part of their capacity and pay them for part of their capacity and commit to that in exchange for a lower rate from door to door, right? Or for whatever their services might be. That'd be a contract carrier. The third-party logistics providers are called 3PLs, and you hear the term 4PL as well. 3PL is just third-party logistics. And what that model started as was really just firms that had the capability to manage the contract and the common carriers, and expanded into more and more capabilities, right? So if I'm a small to medium-sized firm and I can't afford the staff and the tools and the technical depth to be able to really know what's going on in all the routes and to bid it on a regular basis and just keep pressing my costs down and work really tactically, almost in that purchasing function, and also be able to model routes and say, if I go intermodally, truck, water, truck, well, this is how long this ship's going to take this shipment's going to take to get from Berlin to me in Michigan, right? But if I'm willing to wait an extra week or two, I could go, truck to rail to water to rail to truck and use more modal stops, but a lower cost overall delivery. So how can I model those trade-offs? Well, 3PLs have the software and the capability to do that. So even large companies, even very large companies, sometimes will have a relationship with a 3PL to help them build the models. So these guys can give you a lot or they can give you a little. And they get paid well for what they do, but many firms find that they can save enough that it's well worth the millions potentially you're spending on the 3PL because you're saving maybe double that or whatever it is, right? If I give $10 million to a 3PL but they save me $20 million, I'm happy. Okay, some challenges and opportunities. So advances in information systems is a big deal because we're talking about trillions of dollars, because we're talking globally about so much money flowing through logistics. It pays IT systems developers to build better tools for logisticians to be able to do their analysis, bid the market out, model different scenarios, be aware of where shipments are. So there's good investment into logistics systems, good, healthy investment and innovation going into the tools that we have available to us. Globalization of markets is a challenge and an opportunity, right? It depends on if we're the hunter or the hunted, right? But if we're doing well in our marketplace, then often globalization is an opportunity. And it brings with us extra logistics challenges, right? We've got cross-border duties that we need to understand and taxes. We've got all kinds of security transactions at the border. Anti-terrorism has escalated that. The ability to be a trusted shipper, somebody that can get their goods cleared fairly quickly through customs. And, all those specialized skills that are required to be a global logistician, as opposed to somebody maybe just working in the Midwest with shipments, are an additional skill set. There's a push towards sustainability, of course, and this affects packaging, that it's not doing any harm. Maybe more reusable and returnable packaging is definitely a trend in some industries where you do the math and say, if I put this in a cardboard box that's expendable, it has this cost. It goes to the paper mill to be, recycled. If I spend this much money in a reusable package, I avoid the expendable completely, but I have a reverse trucking route, right? So what's the overall environmental impact of that? What's the overall cost of that? How can I make good decisions about returnable packaging and sustainability? goods being returned themselves creates a big reverse logistics flow. We'll talk about that a little bit more, but reverse logistics is also tied in part to sustainability. Getting, things like a battery system out of an automobile and getting it where it can be, safely taken care of and then redeployed, some parts of it reused, some parts of it disposed of properly. And there's a significant impact on delivery, speed, and reliability in the choices that we make. All right, those are a big trade-off with cost. So the reverse logistics system, it's really a complete supply chain dedicated to the reverse flow of products. And these weren't as developed years ago. And, I guess you see pictures of, in 1945 out in the back of the farm as all these old cars rusting out or something, right? And so forth. But, we're more sensitive to landfill, and we're more sensitive to the finite capability of the earth to support what we're doing. And so many companies are designing products that can flow backwards and be disassembled and safely, reused or disposed of in whatever, combination is possible and makes sense. The other thing with reverse logistics is consumerism. And the national brands that build a lot of the products that we think of, we've all learned that if we buy something at Costco and it fails, that Costco says we can take it back, right? So the companies that want access to the Amazons and the Walmarts and the Costcos and the Home Depots, they have to go along with some pretty consumer-oriented return policies. So there's more than just recycling going on in the big growth of reverse logistics. It is a system that is not as efficient as forward logistics. It's not just the opposite. It's its own system, right? It's small volume. It's dedicated to a particular purpose of returning defective goods or returning goods at end of life for proper recycling. You can think of all the bottles, right, in some states that get returned and reused and ground up and turned back into glass. So there's different purposes of the reverse logistics. They're not as they're not as efficient as the forward logistics, but people could make a whole life and a whole career out of this reverse logistics. Right? It's a growing area. So another area to talk about in the information systems is maybe to break it down into three different areas. One is decision support tools. This means being able to model cost and travel times, simulate and optimize decisions that we're going to make. Planning systems, so selecting a carrier, going into an electronic marketplace and seeing different rates for trucks that are available today to pick up my load of half a truckload to Atlanta or a full truckload to Orlando, whatever it might be. So being able to model this in real time and make selections, right, schedule them actually online is a real nice advance in the system as well. You could think of how you book a plane ticket. And it's a little more complicated because it's not just a seat. It's a variable thing that we're buying. But the systems are growing and improving all the time that people that want to buy those services can model it out and buy it. And finally, execution systems. So, the RFID and satellite tracking systems are being leveraged by these IT systems builders and by the delivery companies, the transport companies, to give better visibility into where the goods are. And that's the holy grail of really these people that work in logistics, is visibility across multimodal transportation. It's a lot harder than you'd think it would be. And, it sounds so simple, right? And the way we see delivery of things like, I can click on Amazon like you can and okay, it left the plant. It's over here now. Oh, good. It's left the Reno hub. Oh, good. It's scheduled into Kansas City. I mean, you can see it, but that's through one controlled company's environment, right? Where they can show every step and every scan and every movement and every sort. This is across modes is where it gets more difficult. but it's improving and it's making rapid strides. So another area is material handling systems. So when we think about material handling, you could think of mega material handling, such as a seaport and these giant cranes that reach out over the top of these huge ocean vessels, these Panamax, Tripoli ocean vessels, and start plucking off, in a very high quality controlled way and rapidly pulling off these 40-foot containers off these boats, never a risk of dropping because they're such quality systems and their operators are well trained, and moving them gently and setting them on the back of a train so they can go inland, or setting them on the back of a truck so they can take off across the highway system. Right? So they could be mega systems like that, or they could be these conveyors. So when we think about warehouses, we'll talk about in another module of this, in another section of this module, we've got these sorting conveyor belts, right? And you can Google any of these things and look inside an Amazon warehouse or a UPS warehouse, and you see these. You know it's happening. You don't see the whole system, but what's happening is the trucks, or let's say it's trucks. The trucks all pull up at one end of the facility, and they just get unloaded. But as they're getting unloaded, there's scanners going off. And these aren't people pointing and shooting a gun. These are just these mega immersed in scan things. So it doesn't matter where the label is on the box. It's going to get scanned. It's probably going to get hit more than once. So they say, okay, there it is. It's in. Now, if it's UPS, you and I would see if we went online, arrived at, arrived at Lexington. So that's all automated. But what happens inside is those conveyors bring things together and then peel them back apart so that the trucks that are going to Chicago get filled with those boxes. The next truck leaving for Detroit area gets filled with those boxes. Next truck leaving for Kansas City gets filled with those, and etc. And they get redeployed through this hub and spoke type system. So these are material handling systems also. These conveyor belts that have this great intelligence to them. And packaging. We'd be remiss if we didn't talk about packaging. So Michigan State's got a great degree in packaging, and so do other schools. That's a whole career path as well. It's considered part of the logistics world, and it kind of overlaps between engineering and marketing and logistics, but most people see it as part of logistics. But it has to be sensitive to all these other areas, right? It needs to consider protecting the part, like an engineer would want a part protected. It needs to be considered, if it's retail, of how a marketer would want it presented, right? And I got Siri going off here. You be quiet, Siri. So packaging is an interesting area. It has multiple customers, let's say, multiple clients. And we've all seen great packaging. A lot of people like Apple's packaging, right? It's clean, it's white, it's solid, it exudes quality, but it's also dense. If you look, there's not a lot of air that's deliberately put into that package. You could package it densely and have a good low cost per cubic area with most of what Apple's doing. So you can think of it different ways, right? Is it efficient? Does it protect? If it's consumer stuff, is it beautiful? Something that'll help sell the product. Okay, I'm not going to click into this, but I just point out to you in the lecture that if you'd like to take a look at this, pull up the PDF and click on Meet Kiva, and you'll see some very interesting things with equipment that Amazon has done. And Amazon a lot of times is at the bleeding edge of this stuff. The big companies with research and development people are exploring the boundaries. Kiva is another example of why we say Jeff Bezos doesn't have a tactical bone in his body. He knew he had a problem with the manual way that people were chasing down packages in his organization, and the company was taking a PR hit of, saying, gosh, they're slave drivers. These people are literally running up and down the aisles to pick packages so that you and I could have our 2-day delivery, right? So this was a step to automate in a way that they claim hasn't cost them any employees. And if you watch the video, you'll see that the employees no longer have to go to the parts. The entire warehouse is like a living organism, and every piece of merchandise is randomly floating around on the backs of these kivas, but intelligently coming to a person that could put together my order, your order, and get it out the door, right, in one box. It's pretty cool stuff. So I would encourage you, while you're looking at logistics, hey, take a peek. If you don't go do it now, you never will, right? So go take a peek. In summary, logistics is a very large percentage of U.S. GDP, roughly 8.5% back in 2012, and something like that now, I'm sure. It's expected to grow a bit due to small packages, delivery, and globalization. Global trade is certainly not holding it down. There's many logistics activities between firms and inside firms. It's all the movement to have things in the right place at the right time. Firms have many strategic choices. They need to align functional logistics strategy to the overall business strategy. We have opportunities to outsource some or even all of, or most. I don't know if you ever get all, but much of your logistics functions can be outsourced. We talked about some of the detail of that. Technology is a tremendous support for people that work in logistics, and in a number of different ways that we talked about, with tracking packages or providing tools to analyze and build efficient modes, and to shop, right, and to actually buy logistics services online and see the cost of those in real time. And reverse logistics is a growing area of focus, right? And companies are getting better and better than that. It's not just the opposite. It's not like, well, when the truck drops off our load, put this little box on the back of it. It's not the reverse of the forward logistics. It's a completely different system. And depending on the purpose of the very specific purpose of those reverse logistics, it may have to do with recycling. It may have to do with returns, quality returns, and so forth. It could be packaging, reusable packaging, just making its reverse route coming back to the supply end. So there's different ways that reverse logistics makes sense, and it's a growing area. I hope you enjoyed that. Our next module will talk about modes of transportation, but we shall not do that in this because we're going to break these down a little tighter. I hope you enjoyed it, and that concludes our video.